Okay, so you guys gave us a lot to think about today, huh? A deep dive
Yeah.
into
Yeah.
the 5-year mark of the COVID-19 pandemic declaration.
Mm-hmm.
We're looking at COVID-19, a 5-year retrospective,
Right.
and Joyce Lupiani's piece for FOX5 Atlanta called
Yeah.
COVID-19, 5 Years of Lasting Impact on America. And both of these came out today, March 11th, 2025.
Yeah. 5 years
5 years.
since the World Health Organization declared COVID-19 a global pandemic.
Exactly, March 11th, 2020. And
Yeah.
that really kicked off
Mm-hmm.
a lot for a lot of us. And
Yeah, it does feel like yesterday
it does.
and a lifetime ago all
Yeah.
at once.
Yeah. So what we want to do today is really dive into these sources and pull out the key takeaways for you all about the lasting impact of this global event and just trying to make sense of it all, starting from those early days after that first U.S. case was identified in Washington State back in January 2020.
Yeah, really kind of set the stage for everything that would follow.
Yeah. So where do we even begin? I mean,
Right.
I guess we have to start with the numbers, right?
Yeah, the sheer scale of it.
Yeah. The loss of life is really...
Incomprehensible almost.
Yeah, it's hard to even wrap your head around over 1.2 million people here in the U.S.
That's right, according to the CDC.
Right. And globally, the WHO's official count is over 7 million.
Yeah, and that's just confirmed cases, right?
Right.
When you factor in the estimated excess deaths from 2020 and 2021, it jumps to 14.83 million globally.
Wow.
It just underscores the true impact of the pandemic beyond the direct COVID cases.
Yeah, and that excess death number makes you think about, the strain on the healthcare systems.
Of course.
Perhaps undiagnosed cases.
Yeah, absolutely.
But it's also important to note, I guess, that the immediate crisis
Yeah.
in terms of mortality has really,
Thankfully shifted.
yes, thankfully shifted, right?
Yeah.
And this FOX5 article highlights that decrease in daily U.S. deaths, from over 5,000 a day in 2021 down to around 280 in early 2024.
That's a huge drop.
Yeah.
It signifies a real change, I think, from that acute phase of the
Right.
pandemic.
Right, and that kind of brings us to this term we hear all the time now,
Right.
endemic.
Yeah.
What does that even mean for us in our day-to-day lives now?
Well, it basically means that the virus is here to stay.
Okay.
It's part of our world now, like the flu.
Oh, okay.
We'll likely still see, peaks and valleys in transmission.
Okay.
But it's no longer this global crisis
Okay.
like we experienced
Right.
in those first few years.
Right.
It's something we have to manage and live with.
Okay, so that all-consuming emergency phase
Right.
might be behind us,
Yeah.
but the sources make it clear that the effects are still so deeply woven into our society.
Yeah.
So let's talk about money,
Yeah.
the economic side of things.
That initial disruption was massive.
It was huge, and both sources really detail the economic turmoil of 2020, 2021.
Yeah.
We saw so many jobs, lost businesses closing left and right, especially in those sectors.
Right.
Like
Yeah.
hospitality, retail, travel.
Yeah. The FOX5 piece really emphasizes the devastating impact on small businesses in particular.
Right.
So many of them struggling to stay afloat.
And, you saw so many jobs lost in hospitality, but then also you saw
Yeah.
like the gig economy
Yeah.
and e-commerce
Right.
just completely taking off.
Exactly. Totally reshaped how we do things.
Yeah, and then on top of all that came this huge surge in inflation.
Oh, yeah. I remember feeling that.
And all of a sudden,
Yeah.
everything was just so much more expensive.
Everything.
How did the pandemic even contribute to that?
Well, it was a lot of things all kind of coming together.
Okay.
The 5-year retrospective talks about these economic stimulus measures.
Right.
So there was more demand. But then at the same time, people were getting sick or they were afraid to go back to work or they had to take care of their kids. And then, of course, the global supply chain issues that everyone was talking about.
Okay.
I mean, it was just so much harder and more expensive to get things from point A to point B.
Yeah.
So it all just kind of fueled that inflationary fire.
Yeah, and another area where the impact is just so huge is education.
Absolutely.
The sudden shift to remote learning
Oh, yeah.
seems to have had some really serious consequences.
Really did. And both the 5-year retrospective and that FAX5 article highlight how remote learning really widened existing educational disparities.
Oh, yeah.
So students from lower income families,
Yeah.
students with special needs,
Right.
they often didn't have reliable internet access
Right.
or they didn't have the right technology at home or they didn't have a good learning environment.
Yeah, and the thing is with online learning,
Yeah.
educators all of a sudden had to think about
Mm.
digital literacy and access in a way that they hadn't before. So this
Yeah.
huge realization that there's just this,
Huge gap.
yeah, so much inequality.
Yeah, and the need for better teacher training
Right.
in online instruction.
And this led to, significant academic delays for so many students.
Yeah, and we're still seeing the effects of that.
Yeah, it really makes you wonder what that means for the long term,
Yeah.
for those kids. And then on top of all of that, we had a pretty serious mental health crisis emerge.
Yeah, the isolation, the constant fear, the disruption to everyone's routines. I mean, it really took a toll on people's mental well-being.
Yeah, and we saw these significant increases in anxiety and depression, substance abuse.
Deadly suicide rates.
Yeah, especially during those really intense lockdown periods.
Yeah, 2021 were really tough years.
Yeah, and one of the things that
Yeah.
that the sources point to that is especially dark,
Yeah.
is this surge in domestic violence and child abuse cases.
Yeah, with people trapped at home.
Yeah.
It really limited those avenues for getting help.
Yeah, it's this stark reminder of the costs
Yeah.
of those lockdowns.
Yeah.
And these deeply personal and isolating experiences,
Yeah.
I think also fueled those broader social frustrations. And that heightened political polarization.
Yeah, it really exacerbated those pre-existing
Yeah.
political and social fault lines.
Yeah, we saw it everywhere.
Yeah.
Just constant debates about,
Oh, yeah.
mask mandates, vaccine requirements.
Should we lock down?
Yeah.
How long should we lock down for?
Yeah, and this FOX5 article brings in that really interesting data from the Pew Research Center. 72% of Americans saying they believe that COVID-19 divided the country more than it united it.
Wow. That's a powerful statistic.
Yeah, it just shows you how deep the scars are,
Yeah, it wasn't just about disagreeing on masks or vaccines.
right?
It went much deeper than that.
Yeah, it tapped into these huge ideological differences.
Yeah.
And the article even details some of those ongoing political rifts,
Oh, yeah, like what?
Well, for example,
Yeah.
there's still these big differences between how Republicans and Democrats view the seriousness of COVID-19.
Oh, really?
Yeah, their willingness to get updated vaccines,
Yeah.
even basic stuff like staying home when you're sick or wearing a mask in crowded places.
Wow, so those divisions are still really present.
Yeah, they really are. And, one of the biggest questions surrounding the pandemic is, of course, its origin.
Yeah.
And it's interesting how the sources approach that.
Yeah, they both acknowledge that it's still a subject of
Yeah,
debate and investigation.
right. And they both point out that some parts of the U.S. intelligence community are leaning towards that natural zoonotic transmission theory,
Right.
meaning the virus came from animals.
Right. Probably at a wet market.
Right. But then both sources also highlight that there are these other agencies and reports that are pointing towards that lab leak theory.
Right. The FBI, the CIA, the Department of Energy, a 2023 Senate report,
Yeah.
all suggesting that a lab leak in Wuhan, China is the most likely origin.
Yeah. And I think it's important that they present both perspectives
Yeah.
without
Right.
endorsing one over the other.
Exactly, because we still don't know for sure.
Right.
It shows just how complex this is and the need for, more investigation and transparency.
Yeah. So where do we go from here?
Yeah.
What do these sources tell us about the future of COVID-19?
Well, it seems like COVID is here to stay.
Okay.
Experts are saying that we'll probably see new variants emerge,
Okay.
but there's some hope that these future variants will be less severe
Okay.
because so many people have immunity now
Okay.
from either infection or vaccination.
Okay. And do they say anything about
Yeah.
what we're going to do about it?
Yeah, they suggest that we might start getting annual COVID vaccines.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, like we do for the flu.
Yeah.
It could become part of our routine,
Okay.
and it would help manage future outbreaks
Oh,
and protect those who are more vulnerable.
so you're saying like masks and social distancing could still be
Yeah, it's possible.
okay.
Public health officials will probably keep an eye on transmission rates,
Right.
and they might recommend those things.
Okay.
If we need to slow down outbreaks or
Right.
protect hospitals
Okay.
from getting overwhelmed.
Okay. And we can't forget about how quickly they developed those COVID vaccines.
That's right.
That was really remarkable.
Both sources highlight that as a major success story.
Yeah. Even though the demand for vaccines have
Gone down
Yeah.
since those early days.
Yeah. It's a testament to what science can do.
Absolutely. It definitely helped prevent even more deaths
Yeah.
and change the course of the pandemic.
Yeah. So 5 years later, we're looking at this really complex picture.
Mm-hmm.
We've seen so much loss of life. The virus has become endemic, and we're still dealing with the effects on our economy, our schools, our mental health, and just our society as a whole.
Yeah. The acute crisis might be over,
Yeah.
but COVID-19 is still a big deal
Yeah.
with long-term consequences.
Yeah. And that brings us to this final thought for you all to consider.
Okay.
Given all of these divisions in our society
Mm-hmm.
and the fact that we still don't know for sure where COVID came from,
Yeah.
how do you think these things are going to shape how we respond to future public health crises? Will we trust each other?
Yeah.
Will we trust science?
Will we trust the government?
Yeah.
It's a lot to think about.
It is something to keep in mind as we move forward
Absolutely.
in this new world.
Yeah,
Thanks for taking this deep dive with us.
of course.
We'll see you next time.
See ya.